As promised, United States Senator James Lankford, Republican of Oklahoma City in Washington, D.C., joins us over the phone to talk to us about national and international events that may impact the energy industry and what's going on right here at home. Good morning, Senator Lankford.
Hey, good morning to you.
All right, tell us about, first up, and this is one of the things that Allie told me yesterday, what is this cut red tape initiative that could impact the energy industry?
Yeah, we're trying to work through trying to identify different regulations that are just choking out business, period. So whether that's community banking in rural America, or whether that's environmental regulations, or whether it's oil and gas exploration limitations, identifying the different regulations that absolutely don't make sense, were thrown on industry, and they're trying to figure out where in the world did this come from. There are lots of high-paid lobbyists that are in Washington, D.C. that are chasing down their interests on it, but not a lot of folks that can actually get engaged from small, medium, family-sized businesses to find a place to do it. So we're creating an initiative. It is a bipartisan initiative. I've got a Democrat member that's working with me in the Senate that we're pursuing every regulation that we can find in the country, putting them into different buckets, and starting to chase down how we can actually solve those.
You might need a pretty big pair of scissors, Senator, to cut all the red tape. But I have posted a picture of you on our Facebook page with a link to your website, and that's the first thing you see when it comes on there is hashtag Cut Red Tape Initiative. So we're glad that you're up there making it happen. I also understand that you just had a chance to stop by and see the Wildcatters at the OIPA.
I did, actually. So it's a good thing that we've got a lot of folks that are OIPA and DEPA and multiple other folks that are around D.C., and that also I got a chance to visit with one of them back in Oklahoma and just get a chance to chat and see what's going on there. Obviously, and what happens in Oklahoma and what happens with energy affects the entire country. I remind folks often in D.C., the limited recovery we have had as a country is due to one industry, and it's been the energy industry. The energy industry had not been as strong as it has been in the last 6 years. This nation would not be even where it is right now. Even with this stagnant economy, we would have declined the entire time, except for the energy industry and the bright spot of that. So it's good to get a chance to visit with him, see what's going on, but also see some of the new limitations that are coming down and see ways we can help fight back.
Senator, who is your Democratic partner in the Red Tape Initiative? Because, you know, one man's red tape is another man's protective mechanism, you know, depending on your political philosophy and point of view. And traditionally speaking, Democrats have tended to favor regulations for more oversight of industry, whereas people on the right have tended to favor less regulation. So who did you get to partner up with?
Yeah, I actually partnered with Heidi Heidkamp from North Dakota, also an energy-producing state. She understands extremely well what's happening in her state and the limitations of regulations and how that's choking out energy. And so she was a natural partner in that because she's seen it firsthand and she knows it full well. Now, I would tell you there are Democrats that I talked to here that they absolutely value regulations. In fact, I've talked to several the last 4 years that they honestly believe the more regulations that we create in the federal government, the more jobs we create, because every time they create a regulation, they will tell you it forces a company to hire a compliance officer to fulfill that regulation, which means another job is created in America. And I think that's just unbelievable. That's not a job that produces goods and services. That's a job that creates government paperwork.
So there are legislators.
We as a nation have been best when we create goods and services, not government paperwork.
So legislators actually believe that if you're forced to create a position for oversight, that somehow that's economically productive?
They absolutely believe it. Welcome to Washington, D.C.
Wow,
the first time someone said that to me 4 years ago when I got to D.C., the first person that ever said it to me was actually Dennis Kucinich from Ohio. And I thought that was an anomaly, but I found out, no, that opinion really exists all over D.C., that they think these companies have money. They don't want to hire people, so if we create regulations, we'll force them to hire more people and more people be employed.
That verges on the ridiculousness.
It is devoid of any economic reality, I can tell you that.
Well, Senator, you know, lately the oil prices are starting to go up. You know, we've got this situation with Iran. You know, for the first time ever that I can remember, you know, the United States is producing enough oil that if something were to powder keg up over in the Middle East, we would still have enough to take care of our business here.
We would.
Is there some people in Washington finally starting to grasp that?
There are. I actually had multiple meetings yesterday with individuals talking about the export of oil and trying to explain to people the difference between light, sweet, and sour or heavy crude and the refineries that we have in the United States and our capacity, and then we've got all of this light sweet coming out of the ground in the United States that we don't have refining capacity to do. We've got to put that on the world market. Those refineries that can actually handle that oil, most of them are not in the United States anymore. So we've got to be able to sell that product, buy what we want, but use what we have as well as a great economic resource. Not only just for our own economy and for the jobs that creates, but for the geopolitical power that creates as well. Folks don't want to have to buy from Russia if they don't have to, but they have to because we can't actually sell it.
We're stymied by it, you know.
Yeah, let me just say one thing on the Iran issue that I found the ultimate irony of multiple things with this Iran nuclear deal that's happening. The president's actively working to get the sanctions lifted for Iran to be able to sell crude oil on the world market again, and we can't sell crude oil from the American market. So it, to me, is the ultimate irony that he's actually working for Iran to sell crude, but we can't sell crude. So let's get first things first.
We're talking to United States Senator James Lankford this morning on the Big Chief Plant Services Exploring Energy Show. 96.5 KECO in Elk City and 102.3 KWDQ in Woodward. Senator, talk to us about the recent EPA consent decree for renewable fuel standards.
Yeah, the EPA is trying to figure out what to do on ethanol. This has been an ongoing fight for a while because Congress multiple years ago put in this mandate for the number of gallons of ethanol that would go into the American market, and their assumption at that time was that Americans' gasoline usage would continue to go up. That's not proved to be true. The down economy and more fuel-efficient vehicles on the market, we're using less gasoline than we did several years ago, but the requirements are still the same to continue to use more gallons of ethanol. And so the EPA is trying to find new ways to be able to get more ethanol used, not because it's a good idea, but because they've got this mandate sitting out there that's an EPA mandate. Now, within the law itself and the way that it was written back in 2007, the EPA can waive that gallons usage to a lower amount if it doesn't make sense. Well, it doesn't make sense, and everyone knows that it doesn't make sense. But the EPA is delaying actually making their decision. They're now past a year past due, and API and multiple other organizations got with the EPA and said, we have got to at least get a timeline. I've also held 2 hearings on this, trying to push the EPA to get a timeline of when their decision is going to be made, and while I'm still working to get the renewable fuel standard kicked out entirely. But it's going to take a new law to do that, which means we're going to have to get some Democrats on board to be able to push and get this thing done. But yeah, there are multiple problems. It's a huge mess. There's finally an agreement on the time a decision to be made, but EPA still hasn't made the decision yet, and it's still a year and a half delayed from their previous decision.
Well, something that we've talked about a lot on this show in the last 3 years is the Keystone XL pipeline, and we've joked in the past that maybe President Obama was just trying to run out the clock until his term was up and wouldn't have to make a decision one way or the other. And now we've had 2 or 3 people announce they're running for president. We're only a year and a half away from the next election, and it's looking more and more like he's just not going to do anything one way or the other.
Yeah, he really is out of excuses. The president's always said, I'll make the decision when I get this report or when the things are settled in Nebraska or when, it's always there's something else coming. The draft report is done from the State Department. What he said was the last report that's waiting out there. I believe their final report is done as well. They just haven't published it, showing there is no environmental damage to try to do this pipeline. It's the same pipeline as any other pipeline across the United States that we're all very, very familiar with. So now he's just stalling. And the hard part about the Keystone is not just an energy issue. It's a long-term energy issue, not just for that one pipeline. This administration is trying to slow down infrastructure for being built in the United States to support energy long-term. And I think it's their philosophical belief that if they can choke out infrastructure construction, they can choke out long-term anyone using hydrocarbons for energy. Now, they don't have a substitute for that yet, but they think it'll just magically appear at some point if they can just choke out hydrocarbons, if they can prevent construction of new refineries, if they can prevent new pipelines. Eventually everything wears out and they can just win it by default. That's a huge problem for us as a nation.
Senator, in your opinion, how close are we to getting the ban lifted on our export opportunity?
I actually think we're making real progress on that. I met with 2 different Democrat members yesterday. Both of them, after a long conversation, said, you're right, the export ban should be lifted. That's entirely reasonable. We already sell LNG, liquefied natural gas, around the world. We've opened that up. We start that exporting actually this summer. There's no reason not to do this. You start talking about the difference between the sweet and the heavy, and the light starts to come on for them. You talk about the geopolitical consequences, and they say, yep, this is something we need to do to have leverage worldwide. So I think we're starting to win the argument. It's just a matter of finding the right piece of legislation to put it on and to be able to push it through.
We've been talking this morning to United States Senator James Lankford, Republican of Oklahoma City and Washington, D.C., keeping an eye on the energy industry from the federal and international level as well. Senator Lankford, thanks for joining us this morning, and we look forward to talking to you again next month here on the Exploring Energy Show.
You bet. Glad to do it, guys. Thanks.
All right.
Keep fighting.
Be safe.